Hey friends, it's Steph, baker, engineer, triathlete, and today I'm going to be teaching you how I make my carrot cake jars. First, let's run through all the ingredients we're going to need. Considering it's carrot cake, we're going to need carrots. Usually about 3 large carrots will do the trick, but we measure after we grate them, so it's always nice to have a few extra on hand. Going through the wet ingredients, this is an oil-based cake, so you need a neutral flavored oil like canola oil, works best for me. Brown sugar to get that caramely taste. 4 large eggs. Sour cream or Greek yogurt. I like to use Greek yogurt when I'm baking for myself, just because it adds a bit more protein. Flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt, and all of the spices that make carrot cake. So of course we're gonna use some vanilla extract, but then we have cinnamon, allspice, cloves, nutmeg, and ginger. Now we need a total of 2 cups of grated carrot. So once you think you're about there, grab a measuring cup and check it out. You don't want to pack it in there, but make sure that there's not too much air either. So kind of tap it down a little bit. Now we can set those off to the side while we work on the wet mixture. Now we need 2 cups of brown sugar, and one of the funky things about brown sugar, when you measure it, you have to squish it down. So most recipes will let you know brown sugar packed, but just a reminder, make sure that you're packing it down into the cup. So that's not quite full, I'm gonna have to add a bit more. And then it plops out nicely as if you're making a sandcastle as well. So that's how you know you've packed it in to the right amount. Next up is 1 cup of canola oil. Then we can go ahead and whisk. You can also do this with a stand mixer or hand mixer. Just make sure you're using the whisk attachment. Now we're gonna go ahead and add our Greek yogurt. So we need half a cup of Greek yogurt. Like I said, you can also substitute sour cream. Give that another whisk. Get something coming together that looks almost like a caramel sauce. You want your eggs to be room temperature, so I took mine out of the fridge about an hour ago. If you don't have time for that, you can just soak them in some hot water for a bit. I always crack my eggs on the counter instead of on the side of the bowl because it produces a more even break and you're less likely to get shells in your eggs. But just in case, I always crack them into a separate bowl before pouring them in to my mixture. So it's easier to pull out a shell if I were to get one in it. Break up those yolks and whisk it up. Now we need to add our flavorings. So I'm gonna be starting with vanilla. Using my Lauren Oils pure vanilla extract, so I'm gonna use about a tablespoon. If you're using artificial, then I recommend using 2 tablespoons. Now, the last thing that we are adding to our wet mixture is the carrots themselves. So just dump them in. And then you wanna whisk so that there's no clumps of carrot left. All right, now we put the wet mixture off to the side. All right, dry mixture starts with flour. We need 2.5 cups. We need 1 teaspoon of salt. Do not forget the salt. It doesn't make it salty, it helps enhance the other flavors. 1 teaspoon baking soda. 1 teaspoon baking powder. And I'm just gonna sift all of that, make sure there's no lumps in the flour, baking soda, or the baking powder. Now, last but certainly not least is the spices. This is what gives carrot cake that warm flavor, and they're so important. First one, biggest quantity, cinnamon, full tablespoon of this. Now, when I'm measuring my spices, I tend to be a little bit liberal with them because I like a spiced cake. Allspice, we're gonna use 1 teaspoon of allspice. Same thing, I'm a little bit loose with the measuring of this one. About a teaspoon. Cloves, one of my personal favorites. Full teaspoon of cloves. Ground ginger. We're gonna do a full teaspoon of that as well. Well, a little bit more. And last is nutmeg. Teaspoon of nutmeg. If you don't have all of these spices and you don't feel like buying a bunch of each, first of all, check out Bulk Barn. You can buy just a little bit of each. Or you can probably get away with a pumpkin spice blend if you're not too concerned about the specifics. I would recommend using all 5 of these so you can get the right ratios, but if it's, your first time using a recipe like this, a pumpkin spice blend is very similar. Very rarely do you ever want to use a whisk when you're mixing flour because that can lead to overmixing, which makes things tough and chewy. Flour wet, pour that into the dry. And mix with a spatula. It's more of a folding than a mixing. This is the step where some crazy people would mix in raisins, but I do not like raisins in my carrot cake, so I skip that step. Now, the fun part about making cake jars is that we're just using a sheet pan. So no need to weigh, no need to measure, we just dump it in. You do want to make sure you've prepped your pan with parchment paper and cooking spray. In it goes. By now your oven should have preheated. If not, double check on it. And jiggle it around to make sure it's nice and even. This goes into the oven. Pull the carrot cake out after it's fully baked. If you're not quite sure, you can always do the toothpick test, which take a toothpick, insert it into the center of the cake, and when you pull it out, it should be clean. If it has a few crumbs on it, that's okay, but if it's wet, the cake is not done yet, so you want to put it back in for a few minutes. This one is done, so I'm gonna let it sit and cool. Once it's cooled a little, you can also flip the cake out onto a cutting board to help it cool a bit faster. This is a good time to go ahead and get started on your buttercream. Any cream cheese frosting will do. If you don't have a good recipe, like I mentioned before, mine is available for purchase on my website. It's in my buttercream recipe that includes my cream cheese frosting as well as variations for vegan frosting, different flavoring options, etc. I have flavored this cream cheese frosting with vanilla and a little bit of cinnamon because, like I mentioned, I really like to have that spice flavor in the carrot cake. Now comes the assembly part.